Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whichever order you usually say that in your country. Welcome to 1% Better. I've only had two, stop laughing, I've only had two coffees today so far, man. I'm operating, I need a third. I'm Xylon Vingegaard. Welcome to 1% Better, where we take a look at hidden stories in sport. I'm joined by Dr. David Lipman. Your medical question today is, at what core body temperature would you call a code in your emergency room? And at what temperature do elite marathon runners cross the finish line at? The reason I'm asking this question is because Tour de France is on, Europe is on fire, it's all the rage, everyone's talking about heat, so I thought it would be appropriate.
Well, this kind of depends because people can get cold as well, right? So you're talking about heat. So there's, if they're cold enough, there's a famous statement that somebody isn't dead until they're warm and dead.
What does that mean?
So, well, it means that your physiology can actually start to shut down a little bit in the cold. And so you actually have to warm them up to make sure that what you're seeing is real, right? So there is certainly a level of cold, and I can't remember what that number is. I'm sure it's probably like in Celsius, probably like 30, below 36, I think it is. And then in terms of like heat, it really depends. And again, it depends on code, because you might call a code because someone's is septic or has sepsis or suspicions thereof, in which case a mild fever would be enough. So like, let's call it, 38 degrees, but you're talking about how hot people would be for it to be a heat emergency. And I believe it's probably 39 degrees Celsius. Maybe it's 40. I can't remember exactly what it is, but
40 degrees Celsius, 104 Fahrenheit.
Yeah. We talked about this with Amy Bolsh as well on the episode about doing safe endurance events, because she talked about heat illness at London Marathon there as well. So, and then in terms of the athletes, I don't know if we have a good answer to that question. I mean, we have things like core, and core will, it's quite interesting to see some of that data. You can get like high 38s pretty easily. I think it'll depend. Some of these athletes would really depend, but you also have a bit of a restrictor cap like that. That heat will really put a governor on your ability to keep pushing. So, I don't have a good answer to what these guys would be crossing the line at, but I would say probably 39 is in the realms of possibility for some of these athletes to cross the finish line at without too many eyebrows being raised.
Well, let me tell you what I have here. Apparently, elite runners, particularly in warm conditions, routinely finish at 41 to 42 degrees above Celsius, and some studies have recorded that with no lasting damage. Apparently, exercise-induced hypothermia and classical heat stroke are physiologically different, despite identical thermometer readers. Rate of rise of hydration status, and the fact that the body is still actively thermoregulating, apparently.
Yeah, because eventually you stop sweating is the part of the problem with heat illness, right? And so that becomes dangerous. So yeah, listen, I've said this before, like once we start, firstly, elite or high or extreme exercise performance looks a lot like extreme illness is the first thing. The second thing I would say is until we have these monitors, continuous monitors of whatever, glucose, etc., blood pressure, we're not going to understand some of the extremes that we do see in these situations. Once we start to better characterize it via continuous measures, we start to change our understanding of it. It's quite a fascinating and illuminating thing to think, because we think we know, but we really don't have any idea. We have an idea of snapshots captured in a health setting, not in free living. I have no idea what your temperature is now. I've got a good hunch at it because temperature is pretty well controlled, but I also don't have any idea. For instance, I've got no idea what your blood pressure is when you've had, say, 5 coffees and are running to miss for a plane you're missing, right? I don't know what your blood pressure would be there, but it would probably scare me. I can tell you I've seen measures of people doing, say, a heavy leg press, and it's super high. So our understanding of these measures that we would otherwise say are, pretty well controlled is quite surprising.
We are going to talk about Ironman Lake Placid in a little while, but I did watch it over the weekend, and I was watching Ben Canute run the marathon, and I was like, oh, this is what you mean when you say endurance sport is not healthy for you. The way he was looking, and he was podiuming, he was finishing third, he was running really fast, but just the language, the way his body looked, I was like, Oh, now that I'm out of that endurance bubble of doing long 10-hour, 12-hour event plus events, I see what people mean by this is not healthy for you. But anyway, we'll get there. If you are new to this podcast, we'd ask you to please subscribe and rate the podcast. We take a deeper look into sporting events that has been happening around the world, and we're going to do a deep dive into those in a second. We are supported by one of the best nutrition companies in the business, if not the best, Precision Fuel and Hydration. We're going to talk about the winners of Hardrock in a little bit, but one of their athletes, Jimmy Elam, came in second. Did you look at his reaction there?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy is an interesting one. So I sort of half-tracked Hardrock. What I would say is Hardrock is, if you're outside of the US, it's probably not that high profile. In the US, they think it's, a big deal. It's a really interesting, got a really long storied history in the ultra running space, ultra trail running. So it's a 100-mile race. One year it goes clockwise, the other year it goes counterclockwise or anti-clockwise if you're in the different part of the world. 100 miles, very steep at high altitude. So it's quite a uniquely difficult race for people to get right.
Actually, at 11,000 feet for Americans. I don't know what that is in our elevation, but featuring 33,000 feet of climbing too.
So, it's at 11,000 feet, which is like 3,000 meters. And 30,000 is like 10,000 meters of elevation. It's roughly 3:1 feet to meters. So it's a lot. Super steep climbs, some really big ones. You got to kiss the rock when you finish, and you'll see that if you see any videos of it. Often people struggle on their first time there. So Courtney Dauwalter famously DNF'd her first time. Tom Evans was a favorite for the race and DNF'd on his first effort there. So this was Jimmy Elam's debut there. So super impressive that he got second and went sub 24 hours. And so interestingly, and this caught my eye, he used most of the PF flow gel. And part of the reason that this caught my eye is like the way that the flow gel was made, or the reason the flow gel was made was people were taking gels and adding water to them. They'd squeeze them into a water bottle and add water to them. It was a very cycling thing to do because cyclists are silly like that. So, Andy and the team just said, listen, let's just make this for them so they can buy it and use it. Now, this is quite interesting because it is high density versus normal fluids, right? So like their normal carb electrolyte mix is a lower density in terms of amount of carbs per, like, let's say mouthful. But also it's easy to consume from a water bottle. So he was using a soft flask from here because a part of the problem with Hardrock is it's really hard to fuel because you're at altitude, so you need to fuel because you use more carbs. But also you're climbing a lot and it's quite steep and it's quite technical. So it can be quite hard to take a lot of gels and stuff. So the fact that he uses flow gel is probably a unique way to solve the problem. So it's quite interesting for that. And then, of course, because he's moving slowly and it's a long race, he used a lot of real food, but that would have been at aid stations predominantly. So it's quite interesting how he went about this. An impressive result for Jimmy. And, again, speaks to both Precision's choice of athletes, but how they support their athletes as well to have a guy that's on debut done this and, he's dominating in the US. We'll talk a little bit about it, but this is one of the, I would say, it's kind of Western States and UTMB are the two highest profile 100-mile races in the world. And then the next tier, like the sort of next one right there is Hardrock, and probably gets overlooked a little bit because it sits right between them.
I actually saw on the Precision website, Jimmy talking about them adding value to his work. He said, Precision has made nutrition for my ultras simple and efficient. I no longer have to overthink what I'm taking in during high pressure objectives. So if you'd like to be like Jimmy, we do have a 15% discount code for you on your first purchase. That discount code is BETTER2026. We do have a link in the show notes where that will directly be applied. They also have a very cool service for you where they will help you with your fueling plan. You can get on a call with one of the experts totally free. We do have a link to that calendar in the show notes down below. What's going on with you? Are you still in France? Have you been running?
Yeah. I've been running well, actually. It's been surprising. Had some really nice runs. Did a couple of, I did a really nice summit over here at the back of my place. I don't know if you remember, there's a couple of mountains around. It's one of the mountains there, which got me views of Mont Blanc. It was stunning. Really good day. So really cool to do that. And it's been interesting for me. I've been reflecting on this. I basically doing the same thing every week. Mild variations. My Sunday run is a little bit different. My Saturday run's a little bit different, but the rest of the week's pretty similar. Like uphill intervals on a Tuesday, bit of a sort of progressive run on the treadmill on a Thursday, nice easy run on the treadmill on a Wednesday. I've been reflecting on I've just been layering week on week, and the consistency and the small incremental changes, right? I'm a little bit better every week or a little bit faster every week has just built a level of like where I'm feeling really good now. I'm tolerating it really well and I'm feeling really good. I almost feel like I'm back to being an athlete. And it just makes me like, I wonder if most people do too much variation. And some of that is enjoyment, right? Like you do more variation because you enjoy it, right? The variety is enjoyable in itself. You want to try different sessions. But I wonder if many people would do better to just simplify it back and keep it very simple of, let's not train at 100%, let's train at 80%, but then force progression. What do I mean by that? So I'm not going to go maximally this week. I'm going to go a little bit below so that next week I can do a little bit more and just force that progression like that. Keep the session similar, right? So it might be something like 3 by 10 minutes. So we're going to 3 by 10 minutes. Next week I just got to go a little bit further in that 3 by 10 minutes, right? Just a little bit further on one of the intervals or on 3 of the intervals or something like that. And just slowly progress that and never really train at 100% just to layer the consistency, because for most people, they have so many other stresses in their life. Keeping something less stressful and less shocking to the system might be a better way to do it. Now, of course, this is personality related and all those other things, right? But this is basically the fundamentals of like the Norwegian method is built on. It's like the same thing week on week on week, and you just layer that stuff on top of each other to see how it goes. So that was a reflection I had of my training, because I've really turned a corner, and I had this uphill interval session that I've been doing. I did it yesterday. It was just unbelievable. Like I was on fire yesterday, and I had this other reflection of like, we're just so bad at attributing causation. Because like, why did I have a good session? I mean, the reasons I came up with
No idea.
Music could be one of them, and we're going to talk about that in a second. I had a great night's sleep. My HRV and my recovery stuff was all great. I was doing it in the afternoon, which is usually better for you. Maybe it was because I ate differently and fueled more. Maybe I don't know how long I've been here now. It's maybe a full month, maybe a little bit like in and around. So maybe the altitude, and it's not a lot of altitude, but enough. Like maybe that's now I'm adapted to that, or maybe I'm just like progressing. I have no idea. So it's quite interesting, like how bad we are just going like, oh, this is why, right? And then similarly, because I don't know why, it's hard to know why I might be struggling. And again, this feeds back to like, maybe we should do less variety, because it's hard to know when you're going to be like what's playing into performance and what may be hindering it to some degree. Now, of course, if you have a terrible night's sleep, and we'll talk about this with respect to the Tour de France, if you have a terrible night's sleep, okay, maybe you don't perform, right? So it makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, I did have this thought though and we're going to have 2 product suggestions for tech companies. The first one is here. Strava should have a feature that links songs from your Spotify to parts of your training. I.e., what song was I listening to during that interval? So that you can see, you get like heart rate for that interval. It's like, and the song that was playing.
So cool. Yeah, that would be
Or
cool.
indeed, just a playlist you listen to there. And of course, you could hide that or share it. But I think people would get a lot out of this, because people love music and they love training music. This is like, I had this moment, I was listening to Down with the Sickness by Disturbed, which is quite a heavy song. And I was going uphill, and I was like, I'm going to put myself in an absolute grave here. I was going so hard uphill. My heart rate was like 185. It was like, wow, okay, yeah, this is proper. So it was quite interesting. But my body's feeling pretty good, which is great. And then, we'll come to some of my stride data in a second. But yeah, how have you been going, mate? What have you been doing?
I rode my road bike outside yesterday for the first time, 4 kilometers. I just came back a few days ago from Europe, and I'm home for like 10 days before heading back to Europe again for the Tour de France fam avec Zwift. And I actually just went to ride for my mind. Like I am at the limit at the moment of breaking point as far as work is concerned. It's just a really, really busy period. And my cycling is what saves my life. My road bike is what saves my life. And I just needed to get out 4 kilometers just to test how it felt. And it felt amazing. It was only 10 minutes. It didn't feel totally amazing because I haven't ridden my bike in over a year while I'm recovering from spinal fusion surgery. So all my batteries were dead. Despite charging them, the one battery was completely dead. So I was stuck in one gear. So that's also why I kept the ride very short. But I'm going to try either today or tomorrow, head out maybe for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, see how that feels.
So I have it on good authority that you were walking around the Tour de France and telling every single person you met that you'd done Kona, and that somebody who was at the Tour de France with you was your domestique for the day. That is what I heard you told everybody there. So I just wanted people to hear that your Kona story isn't dead yet.
Are you referring to Bobby Julik?
I'm not saying who told me or what was happening, but I just know that this is what happened. I heard this from many people.
No, no, I plead innocence. I actually don't bring it up. People were bringing it up to me. People would come up to me. It's so funny how people respect Ironman. So I had a couple of people training for their first either 70.3 or Ironman, and they would come up to me and say, "So and so told me you've done 4 Ironmans. Can I just ask
Well,
you?
that's
I'm
a
doing my
lie.
first, blah blah
Well,
blah blah blah."
that's a huge lie, mate. You haven't done 4 Ironmans.
I've done 4 Ironmans, as I told you before. It doesn't matter if the swims are shortened, cancelled. You talk to someone on the red carpet after 10, 11 hours of racing, tell them you haven't done a full Ironman. You'll get punched in the face in that moment.
Good luck catching me. You've just done an Ironman, apparently. So there's no hope you're going to catch me. But anyway, carry on. They came up to ask you about it.
Yeah, they just, it's funny how they respect it. And then I say, my answer is always like, an Ironman is actually very doable. I believe that most people can do an Ironman. Like the times are very generous. Obviously, you have to train for it. You can't just like wake up and go do it, but it's actually very manageable. But the perception that people have of it is very interesting, which I guess speaks to branding as well and how people see themselves.
Speaking of branding, the tattoo, mate. I'm surprised you haven't got one.
No chance. No chance. I'm sorry, Iron Man. We are supported by Stride running power meters on this podcast. We're going to talk about Josh Kerr in a little while, but I was watching the reel that you sent me. He's been using Stride to attack this project that he has been chasing, Project 222.
Yeah, well, I don't know if he was using it per se or if Brooks were using it to help with their stuff. So, in the reel that you can find, he was on in normal road shoes, I think it was, or maybe one of the spike variations on a treadmill. But I saw some pictures of the spikes with the stride pods on there. I couldn't find that picture again, but I did see some pictures, and I was thinking this actually makes a ton of sense because for the most part, when you're on a treadmill, you can use stride pods, that's fine, and you can get the dynamics. But you need a special treadmill for spikes. And more importantly, with spikes, you're actually trying to understand how they work on the bends as well. Because the bends are a half your race. And so you need to understand dynamics on the bends with respect to specifically super spikes, because now they're 20 mils high, more than 20 mils high in the middle. And you've got to think about dynamics and how they affect things. So I'd want to be looking at different dynamics out on the track. And that's where Stride really offers an opportunity because you can get kinematic data, you can get kinetic data, you can understand to some degree the cost of running in those spikes from an energetics perspective. So I think it's really smart to be using stride pods in that context. Take them out to track, use them, and then you get that data back and look at it because that's more ecologically valid rather than just being stuck in a lab and you're like, oh, on a treadmill, okay, well, the spikes look good. When he's running at that speed on a treadmill, it's like, it's completely different to running on a track. So, because, again, you're trying to balance many factors like cornering, like stability, like cushioning, but also like traction, which is not really that relevant on a treadmill. So I think I think it's really cool.
If you'd like to check out Stride running power meters, David and I both use them. We do have a link in the show notes down below. Click on that link. It lets them know it comes from us. Let's get through some community shoutouts and have a look at your achievements and what you have been up to lately.
Yeah, so shout out to Phil Coleman. So I saw we got a couple of weeks of shout outs because we sort of had a banked episode last week. So Phil Coleman ran the Irish on a 10 mile over the weekend and went 73 minutes there, which is great. But he also ran the Fingal 10K a little while ago in 42:05. So it's great running there. And Rudy Becker won the Swiss Alpine Film 78K in just under 9 hours, 8:58, with 4,500 meters of elevation, which is insane. Great work, Rudy. And then Tobias Schmidt, this guy's got a great life. He's just traveling around racing all the races he wants to race. I love it. I love what Tobias is doing. I might try and catch him in a few weeks. He's staying in Sham for the summer. So he did the marathon at the Monte Rosa Valseveg by UTMB and came 16th overall. We'll talk about this in a second for one of our previous guests. He went 5:29 there, and that was 2,950 meters elevation. So that's pretty tough going. So it's a deep field there.
Also, congratulations to Karen Green, who ran her 10K PB in 46:59, and Cynthia Chipuka, who ran the women's 10K in Glasgow in 68 minutes. And then we have a cool new feature on the show where we're sort of going to have a look at what previous guests on this podcast have been up to and what they are achieving. Who's the first one?
Yes, Peter Engdahl. He won this Monte Rosa Valseveg race by UTMB in 4:19. So that speaks to how, we talked about Tobias. He went 5.5 hours, and Petter went 4:19. So, and Tobias again got 16th. So, that's how strong this run was from Petter. So, really impressive stuff from him there.
Then Ironman Lake Placid took place over the weekend. Christian Hugenhag, who's on the podcast a few weeks ago, came in at 10th. And then Matthew Marquardt was second. He ran a marathon of 2:37 there. I caught up with him yesterday. He was super chuffed with that. A listener question in from our chief meme officer, Spencer Lauderbeck. And if you don't know what that is, you can follow us on Instagram on 1% Better Pod. Spencer put some killer memes together for every single episode that we do based on what we talk about. And we really, really appreciate him for that. It is totally unpaid, which is how David and I prefer it and how we afford our villas, which we're about to talk about shortly. We have a question in from Spencer. With David's recent work on UV exposure, I'd love to hear his opinion on optimal clothing for summer running. It's common for guys to choose to run shirtless when it's hot out, but a clothing company can't sell something you don't wear. So is that why they make these clothes? Or is the UV protection beneficial for blocking the thermal radiation? And there really is something to this, and it makes you cooler. I think you guys talked already about the Nike Holy shirt last year.
Yeah, so I went to try, I think it's the Radical Airflow. I went to try that on last year at UTMB when Nike had an activation. So what I would say about this, and this pertains to any temperature, any outdoor activities, you're always balancing thermodynamics and aerodynamics, right? In summer, you then also have the implications of thermal radiation, right? So not thermal radiation, solar radiation. So there's thermal radiation, the heat from the sun, but there's also the UV radiation. So these two things are slightly different. One of them is about the heat from the sun, and one of them is about the UV rays, right? So the best clothing is really subjective and context specific, period, full stop, right? That's what I'd say there. You need to be happy and comfortable in what you're doing. That's also like a period, full stop. So for sun protection, the best thing you can do is cover up completely, but that's a thermal nightmare. And that may also be a bit of a nightmare when it comes to aerodynamics, right? Skin isn't necessarily that good either. We talked to the, I think it's a second episode of it with Robbie Ketchell about this with respect to some of the aero stuff he's doing. So skin isn't great in that respect. So you can certainly get better aero effects from using clothing, but then you're just trading off some of the thermal radiation because it holds heat in, perhaps. It may also impact sweating, right? So one of the key ways that we lose heat as humans is to sweat. So you need something that will facilitate that. So the Radical Airflow is meant to feel cool. Now that is different to being cool, right? So we see this with the Omnius headbands. Like the research suggests that those Omnius headbands that people wear, you feel cooler wearing them. They're not necessarily creating any more coolness, right? So what I'm getting at here, also, that Radical Airflow probably doesn't help you at all. I would guess it doesn't help you at all for sun, right? It's got holes in it. So, you need to think about what you want to wear in that context. Obviously, sunscreen, and, I'd advocate for Peloton. I advise them, conflict of interest, but, that's doesn't feel like you're wearing sunscreen, which is why all of the Peloton are using it at the Tour de France.
Yeah, I spoke to a professional rider while I was in Europe, and he was raving about it, by the way.
Yeah. It does not feel like you're wearing sunscreen. I know Peter Tierney, ex-guest, I got him some and he loves it as well. So all of that is to say, you kind of need to balance this stuff. You want to run without a shirt on, I think a small amount of sun exposure, whatever that is for you, you get to choose, and I'm not going to give you a number, but a small amount with the right time of day may be okay. But you do need to think about your UV exposure over time, both from a skin aging and a skin health perspective. And then, of course, when we're talking about UV loads at the Tour de France, we're talking about recovery, right? Because if you've got a bunch of UV radiation that your body has to deal with, now how do you recover from that, right? They've got other stuff to recover from as well. So there's certainly a level of inflammation from that. So I don't think there's a right answer here, Spencer, but I would say you need to be aware of the sun and its role that it plays.
Thank you for that, Spencer. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can DM us on Instagram, 1% Better Pod, with any of your questions, or you can also email us. We have an email address in the show notes down below. We did hear from Ihoa Godzeta, who said, "Hi, David. I last listened to your podcast with Aitor, and what strikes me more is not what Lactate can do, but it raises questions such as, have we been training correctly in terms of how we were getting the advantage of the lactate produced? cause very often we avoid generating it, but also even when it is produced, do we train being aware of how much we can get advantage from it? I believe not with the actual knowledge. Ato didn't get into that in this course. He is focusing on exogenous, but I would love if you could bring someone who could bring some light into this with the current knowledge that there is on lactate. And then you sort of asked him to clarify a little bit what he meant. And he said, here's an example. How often have we tried to train below lactate 1.5, for example, but we would actually benefit from that type of scenario, but specifically maybe after a high intensity session due to the lactate accumulation in the blood? That substrate would not be a waste, but would the body use it as it is shown now as a better substrate, even in low intensity, and even enhance the fat oxidation in low intensity work? My question is more about how adding different work one after the other might be beneficial, or have we not learned anything new in respect to how to organize training better from the recent understanding that it becomes the preferential source of energy and hence pushes the adaptations in each environment? I thought it might have brought some light into that.
Yeah. So firstly, thanks for the questions. Really appreciate it. Also, this was, she tagged in Aitor on X as well and all this sort of stuff. So I sent a couple of texts back and forwards with Aitor. He's super busy at the moment. He's obviously just launched Exolactate. That'll be, I think they're going public with sales soon. So there's lots going on for him. So he didn't have time to get on the podcast. But I did have a chat to him about this. So first things first, we produce lactate at all times. So just because we have a lactate of 1.5 doesn't mean we're not using a ton of lactate and it's not doing its job. It's the first thing, right? So it's also worth remembering that exogenous lactate is given. We take it, right? Endogenous lactate is earned. We got to do work to get that. And there's a cost to that work, right? There's a cost to generating endogenous lactate. And that can be something like the mechanical loading. So thinking about it from a running perspective, the mechanical load accrued, right, is something we have to think about. And that's probably the biggest limiter for most people in running is the amount of mechanical load they can tolerate. Right? This is why a ton of runners are doing a ton of cross-training. So lots of positive things come from creating the lactate, including the benefits to the brain, etc. Right? So this is what the lactate does, whether it's endogenous or exogenous. So there's lots of benefits that come from it. But from a training perspective, you can't just turn around and generate more lactate and use it immediately. Right? Generating it has a cost. Right? So I've just created, say, a lactate of 8. It's good to say, yeah, that's what we should be then exercising. Like the problem is you've created that, so you have fatigue as well. Now, lactate isn't creating fatigue, but there is fatigue there, right? So that's the first thing. And all the benefits do happen, but they're all downstream for the costs of developing that lactate, right? So I think, yes, we understand lactate differently, but it's more like it's more understanding the black box that's sat in the middle of what we were seeing as benefits of exercise, which is as a result of lactate. Lactate isn't the fatigue driver. It's actually the lactate's creating many of these benefits. So I think as we understand it differently, I don't think we would train differently because we do have to, we can't sustain high intensity training every day. It's not possible, right? So that's why supplementation may be beneficial. Is like we can augment something that's normal. So I mean, this may be in part, and it's not why the sort of Norwegian double threshold model was developed, but it may be part of why it's effective is that we generate an amount of lactate and then in the afternoon we go again and maybe we see some of the benefits of that lactate acutely and subacutely in the afternoon. Who knows? But yeah, I think we have seen over time, regardless of the why, which is like the metabolics of it, the lactate accumulation or not or whatever, we've seen that people cannot sustain high intensity training at all times. And we've seen that there seems to be a benefit of cycling hard and easy days. So those things are, I won't say there's any true established gospel and like set in stone, but we're pretty close to it with that sort of stuff, particularly when it comes to running, right? And then we see it in cycling as well because, cyclists don't train hard every day either.
I got a question for you. Do people like the Norwegians, and maybe not just them, the Norwegians, people like Tadej Pogacar, UAE, do they make these kind of discoveries a few years in advance, keep it to themselves before it then becomes more widespread?
I don't know if I don't think they're making eureka discoveries. I don't think it's like they woke up one day and decided, maybe today we try 2 interval sessions and then like magically a whole system was created. generally what happens is you start from a point and things slowly evolve. So what their training looks like today is an evolution of what it looked like yesterday and the last month and last year and 5 years ago, right? So you have this slow evolution, and generally that's passed down from coach to coach, right? Now, what's interesting is where you start to have language silos, whereby there's a lot of knowledge that's kept in language, right? So China is a good example. Like Chinese training is very different because of a shared language. Norwegian training is obviously there's a great level of English there, but there's a lot of shared knowledge within Norway in Norwegian. When I was coming up as a coach, there was all these Eastern Bloc manuals we used to try to get translated from Russian to learn what the Eastern Bloc were doing in strength training, right? So I think you kind of have this kind of like what Charles Darwin saw with evolution of like the Galapagos Islands, and then there's sort of this environment that creates its own evolution, or Australian animals, right? There's like kangaroos and stuff. Like you have this evolution that happens over there that's kind of in a silo, and perhaps language becomes a bit of a barrier there. And then certainly previously, like sharing of knowledge was not easy. Now on the internet, like you can listen to idiots like me talk about this on a podcast, right? So this level of dissemination, this could go anywhere in the world and people could learn from it. So we're certainly getting it differently. So I don't think they hold stuff back as much as, they do experiment and learn from themselves. And then the question is always, does this work for me, or does this work as a guiding principle for everybody? And then again, there's a concept of the methods are many, but the principles are few. So there are some established principles that you use to then dial in for the individual.
I was actually reading an article by an author, and I think you met with the author a few weeks ago, about him he was a runner and he moved to Ethiopia for a year and a half to learn about their training methods and figure out why they're so good at running, and basically discovered that this training has been shared from generation to generation over many years, but it hasn't per se been written down and documented and tested in a lab. So the way the West views it is very differently, but it is years and years of expert proven like training that has brought results, and that gets shared down from generation to generation.
Yeah, it's like empirical evidence is what they would call that. So I tell a story often, and apologies for those who've heard it. The first ever training book I read, 2005, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, written in the 1970s.
Wow.
Right? So it's 30 years old at the time. It's now 60 years old. There is stuff that he wrote in there that was considered bro science, and there is now science to support what he was saying at the time.
Oh, wow.
When it's somebody's job and their ability to eat depends on it, it's worthwhile listening to their experiences and what they've found to be helpful and what works.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, let's move on. We are going to get to what's come across my desk in a second, but I wanted to give a shout out to John Bishop Sharp for his comment on YouTube. We have been talking about low heart rates for a couple episodes the last few weeks. He said, my resting heart rate average is 40 and it can be as low as 37. It did jump to between 45 and 49 for 3 weeks after I got my COVID shot. And after a long run, it can also be between 47 and 52 for a couple of days after a marathon. But yes, I do freak out the nursing staff with that low heart rate.
Well, I think, so that's a good example. So before HRV was a thing, people used to track their resting heart rates in the morning, right? And so you do see this. That is just, and that's a perfect example. We had a COVID shot and we had a marathon. Both of those are significant stresses potentially, and it threw out physiology a little bit. So you're less ready to absorb stress. It's a great example of it. I guarantee you if he was checking his HRV, it would be down as well.
And then every episode, we ran a Spotify poll based on what we spoke about. What are the latest results?
Well, this one was racing in the event T-shirt. We talked about this a few weeks ago. So 75% of people said it's a hard no. So 75% of people are on the right side of history, and then 25% says do what makes you feel good, which I think is a reasonable take. I don't think. Anyway. Yes.
We also got a Spotify comment in from Jack Farlow, who said, we want a 1% better edition of Cribs, an episode on David's private villa and Xylon's luxury hotel. If you don't know what we're talking about, we were both podcasting from, I don't know what to call it, secondary properties we have involvement in.
I will send you a video that was done of Xylon's luxury hotel, Jack. So I know Jack here.
I'm lucky to be let through the front door.
It's got a drone that flew through it. Let's put it that way. That's how big it is. This drone flew magically around it. It's an amazing shot. Actually, a really good video.
We got a comment in on Spotify as well from Clement SJ, who said, how fair do you think it is that amazing athletes like Christian Hogenhaug achieve incredible athletic feats but aren't highlighted even during the live broadcast, let alone after the race? If you think it's a problem that nobody cares about what athletes finishing 4th to 10th and below, even at Kona, what can we do about it?
Yeah, we chatted a little bit at this talking about Challenge Roth, where Christian didn't get much airtime, even though he was in the top 10. Is it like this is pretty common? Like if you watch a Diamond League, no one really looks at anybody other than the first person. Now, if that first person is a ton ahead, you'll see nobody else. If they're in a pack, you'll see the pack, right? And so you kind of, and I think that's the same here. If you have a bike pack and Christian Hogenhaug's in it, even if he's in 10th, you will see him, and if he's not, you won't see him. Part of this is to do with logistics. Part of it's to do with the narrative of the race and what people are interested in. Now, Christian Hogan's fans will be interested in him, and his family will be interested in him. But for a casual watcher, they're probably more interested in what's happening at the front, unless something crazy is happening at the back. There's a mechanical or something else, right? We see this in the Tour de France as well, right? So if you're in the back of the Gruppetto, no one cares, the Tour de France, right? If you're in the breakaway, you get on TV. So I think this is pretty common. It certainly isn't fair, but sport isn't fair. Like that's what sport is, right? But I do think this drives some behavior we see. So some people maybe going off the front in the Tour de France to get some airtime for their sponsors. You'd see the same in the bike leg of, say, Kona. People go off the front for their bike sponsor, etc. So yeah, I don't know if there's much we can do about it other than talking about the results, talking about these individuals, and then the individuals need to do a good job of telling their own story. Because I guarantee you, if people are bought in and they have a high profile, then people will do it. So if you look at, there are certainly, let's say, event trackers, apps that are released, and they'll often, certain events will release who was the most followed person. And it's almost always people with a big social media following who do a good job of developing fans. So I'd say that's the other bit, right? Is get on podcasts. These people need to get on podcasts, share their stories, develop followings. Because like Lionel Sanders is a good example. He'll get airtime because people are interested in Lionel. Yeah. He's not going to be top 10 anytime soon. Yeah. So
yeah, it's very difficult. You have to, like you say, logistically it's difficult, and you have to follow the narrative. Firstly, you have to follow the front of the race and who's winning. And then secondary, you have to follow any big name or high profile athlete who maybe isn't having a good day and check in on them and see where they're at. Maybe they had a bad swim in the context of triathlon. And then in the context of cycling, like the Tour de France, I would actually disagree. I would say the Gruppetto is interesting if they are close to the time limit. If they're not, then it's not interesting.
But do they show the Gruppetto?
They should, but logistically it's very difficult. They don't show it. They do. They used to show it when it was Mark Cavendish, and he used to fight through every mountain stage to make the time limit, and almost every mountain stage was touch and go.
Fight through or like hang on to the car to get through?
No, fight through. You get eliminated if you hang on to the cars. Someone like Mark Cavendish would not be doing that in the Tour de France.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely happens in smaller races throughout Europe, but and I think it was Vincenzo Nibali who maybe got thrown off for the Giro d'Italia once for doing that. But yeah, you're not going to see that in the Tour de France. There are loads of eyeballs now. Prove me wrong. Bring me the evidence. Right, let's move on. We've got loads to get through. We are supported by Nomio, and we got a listener question in from James Meldrum, who said, is the compound in Nomio bioavailable in broccoli stems? And how many broccoli stems would I need to eat before bed to win parkrun tomorrow?
Well, charitably, I'd say, you're a great athlete, so you can win parkrun, period, James. But no, jokes aside. So stems, there are two things that people talk about with broccoli extract, right? So one is sulforaphane, which is something that's been popularized, particularly in a health context. That is one of the isothiocyanates, ITCs, that exist. So if you look at the Nomia website, it's all about ITCs. So sulforaphane is one of them, right? So these are the compounds here. So broccoli stems themselves, not super high in sulforaphane, right? So the most bioavailable sulforaphane you can get, and this is in all cruciferous vegetables. Cruciferous vegetables are cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. The highest you can find, highest concentration, are actually in broccoli sprouts. Right? So these are grown, these little sprouts, right? They have 30 times more ITC than mature broccoli does, right? But the ITC content of Nomio, a Nomio shot, is equivalent to approximately 2.5 to 3 kilograms, which is 6.6 pounds of fresh broccoli. right? So if you're using, so like that is context here. And there's this big push at the moment, and I wanted to sort of say this. I know we were talking about this. There's a huge push at the moment to make your own supplements. Don't buy gels, just mix in like this or whatever. By all means, do that. Do it yourself is fine. But at the same time, why would you go out to eat out? It's so much more expensive. Why don't you just make it at home? Right? This is the same argument. The answer is convenience. Right? Like you can do this yourself. I know people who've made their own gels. Fine, go for it. It's just messy and inconvenient. If you have the time to do it, great, go do it. If it's a hobby, like great, go do it. But like I just find this like, such a hilarious thing. People will pay for things that make it convenient. Why would you use Deliveroo? Why don't you just go pick it up yourself? So much cheaper. The answer is convenience.
Yeah.
Like you pay for convenience. This is how the world works. You pay for convenience. Someone has found this out how to do it. They scaled it, and then it makes it financially viable. It's just such a like. It's been astounding to me to watch this. Like, yeah, I mean, I've done this stuff as well because I was a poor student and I had time. I was money poor, not time poor. Now I am time poor, so I'll pay for it. It's great. Like this, like it's a gift to you. So anyway, I digress. But we are interested in people's experiences using Nomia. So if you do, if you have like bought any and used it, please let us know. Send us a message. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Keen to hear your experiences. What did you feel? What did you see, etc. We do have a discount. It's 20% off. Single use per customer for a limited time only. We are still working on the Australia side of things. We will get back to people. I'm so sorry. We are working on this. So do watch our socials for that. So follow us on social media. We'll put something out there to let you know if and when it's live in Australia. And the code to use is the number 1, then the %sign, and then Nomio, all in capital letters, and then 20. So we've got that link in there. Also, we have the code in the show notes as well, so you can copy it across there to use it.
Yeah, they are a new partner to ours, so please support them. If you are even just a little curious to try it out, we'd encourage you to do so and would love your experience, as David said. Let's have a look at what's come across my desk this week. I guess we have to start with football first, with the culmination of the World Cup, and continue a discussion we've had previously. Should we start with national coaches? It seems like all the rage at the moment where some high-profile people are taking on jobs as national coaches.
Yeah, so, I mean, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. There's 2 things are happening. People are losing jobs / leaving, whether that's under duress or not, I don't know, as a result of bad results of the World Cup. And again, like part of the challenge here, and we talked about like worst coaching jobs to have previously, part of the challenge here is like, what's success? Like if you're England, they probably see the World Cup as a failure. They came 3rd. I don't think coming more than 3rd was a realistic chance for them.
It's so ridiculous. They've only won it once, but in that discussion we have of worst coaching jobs in the world, I think the England football coach was number 1 or number 2, if I recall correctly.
Right up there. It's right up there. Yeah. Same with Man United, right? So this is the thing is like part of the challenge is like an expectation, right? Because expectation sets you up for failure and sets you up for unhappiness. So basically, there's a lot of people who thought they should be winning, right, and didn't. So these coaches are gone for whatever reason, and some of them underperformed, fair, but like some of them just weren't going to do that well. So anyway, so be it. So anyway, interestingly, what's happened since we previously mentioned that Jurgen Klopp is going to probably manage Germany, and that looks to be all but done.
Yeah,
Arne Slot is probably going to be the new Dutch manager, but it's yet to be confirmed. So that's like, Liverpool are going to pay part of that apparently, part of that contract. So we'll see because he's, the ex-Liverpool manager. But Zinedine Zidane has been announced as a new coach of France after Didier Deschamps has stepped away, which is really interesting. And then Pep Guardiola,
he's been hanging on for this job for a few years. He's been offered loads of jobs since he left Real Madrid, but he's only ever wanted the French national job, and he's waited years for this. So interesting to see how he does. Yeah.
It's interesting as well. He didn't go in as an assistant coach and then like step up anyway. Football's funny like that. And then Pep Guardiola's in talks with Italy apparently. So let's see if that ends up happening. That'd be a huge turn up. He's apparently fluent in Italian. So there you go.
Oh man, they didn't even make this last World Cup. Italian football is a mess at the moment, and someone like him could certainly walk in there and fix things.
They didn't make the last World Cup either, mate. It's not just this one. They haven't made the last 2.
True. And despite winning the Euros in between, like before that, they won the Euros. So. Should we talk about the World Cup a bit? I mean, the final was one of the most disappointing games I've ever seen in football. But I think the last World Cup in Qatar, that final was probably the best final you'll ever see in a World Cup in your lifetime. And it set you talk about expectations, probably set our expectations too high for this one.
I don't know. I think on reflection, let's call it after the glow of this World Cup is gone, I think we'll reflect on this and say it wasn't that great a World Cup from a quality of matches perspective. I certainly struggled, but I thought that was me. But let's see how this uh, let's see how this ages. I certainly got some comments on YouTube from, I don't know if he's a regular listener or not, but they certainly didn't like some of my football takes. So so be it. So thank you for the engagement. We do appreciate all engagement, YouTube or otherwise. So in the Football Cup, so Mbappe has become the first player to win a Golden Boot twice. I thought that was quite cool for him, especially young. I mean, he could win it 3 times. Wouldn't surprise me if he wins it 3 times. So there's that. At age 30, Rodri from Spain has won every trophy.
He's ridiculous. So, he is ridiculous.
World Cup. He's won a World Cup. He's won a Euros. He's won a Nations League. He's won a Club World Cup. He's won the Champions League. He's won 2 Super Cups, 4 Premier Leagues, 2 FA Cups, 3 EFL Cups, a Community Shield, a Ballon d'Or, a Golden Ball, and the UEFA Euro 2024 Player of the Tournament. That is ridiculous.
And he was Ballon d'Or last year.
Yes, Ballon d'Or. Yeah.
Ballon d'Or, yeah. I would expect he'd won more FA Cups, only 2. I wonder if he won more. Like, it feels like Man City win the FA Cup every other year. It's ridiculous. But yeah, he is unbelievable.
Yeah, so that's a cool bit of trivia. Spain conceded 10 shots on goal all tournament, which is an average of 1.25 shots per match, which is crazy.
Makes sense in the final. I think after 90 minutes, if I stand to be corrected, Argentina had 0 touches of the ball in the box and 0 shots on goal after 90 minutes. Insane.
And you see this in rugby, this swing between dominance of offense and defense, and I wonder if there's a little bit of that. It's obviously less so in football. Like, football's defensive heavy, always has been. So maybe that speaks to it. But this is in the context of beating Argentina, France, Belgium, and Portugal, right? So that's pretty impressive. But in all of that, they've extended their unbeaten streak to, I have 28 here. It might be 38. I can't remember which one it is. I need to check that up. But I mean, ridiculous. Even if it's 28, it's ridiculous. They've also won the last 2 World Cups, and they've won 2 World Cups and 3 European Championships since 2008.
Yeah, they won the one in South Africa, 2010. That was the first one.
Yeah, and then the Spanish teams have won 9 Champions Leagues and 9 Europa Leagues in that time. Spanish coaches have won the Champions League, Europa League, League One, Premier League all last season.
Yes, so something we should look at. Some colleagues of mine in Italy who love football alerted me to this fact. I might get the numbers wrong, but in the Spanish league, apparently from about team 5 or 6, the teams who finished 5th or 6th, right to the last team, there was only something like a 6-point difference. How insane is that? We should look into that. I wonder why that is, if it's an anomaly.
Spain is doing a lot with development of football. So their women's teams are winning as well. Their youth teams are winning. There's like a lot of, this is how we play in Spain, a lot of vertical development, similar to what Ireland have done in rugby, to create like a national way of playing and then filtering this through all the way down. South Africa are doing the same in rugby. So it's really interesting to watch these countries who are really organized, who are doing systematic things at a country level and scaling it. Like, I know the Springboks, I can't remember the name of it, but they have a group of people headed up by Dwayne Van Meulen that floats between all their elite teams. Their under 20s, under 18s, the women's teams, and they share ideas from people like Rassi and what they're seeing there and then share it around. So when you start to get higher level thinking in this organization, you start to see the success. And we've talked about this a lot, where talent initially wins, then systems win, then talent wins. Right? Again, when you have systems that equal, but now people are finding ways to innovate on top of that again, which is quite interesting. And the last reflection I had was rest as a concept in football. It's not usually a concept here, but we had basically football fundamentally changed in this World Cup. We had quarters for these drinks breaks, right? Which changes the rest completely. It also changes momentum. And if momentum wasn't a factor, you wouldn't have timeouts in sports. And we do have timeouts in sports, and they affect momentum. Right? And you saw this a lot. There was really, the game became stochastic into quarters. It really affected momentum at times in certain games. And then similarly, the last 4 men's World Cups and 3 women's World Cups, the 4 men's Euros and 3 women's Euros were all won by the side who won the first semi-final, which meant they got 24 hours of extra rest or indeed preparation time. So you want to talk about that? And then there's also the halftime show we could talk about that was like a half hour. That was a new way of sort of, I guess, more rest that you otherwise wouldn't have when it comes to things like fatigue. So, yeah.
America was Americaning. I was interested in watching that halftime show, but it was weird for me to have a 30-minute halftime break during a football match. Never seen that before. Okay, we mentioned it earlier. Hardrock 100, a brutal 102.5 mile ultra marathon with 33,000 feet of climbing at an average altitude of above 11,000 feet. What happened?
Well, Courtney Dauwalter won it. She broke her clockwise course record, but she's still yet to break 26 hours there, which is frustrating for her. If you hear her talking, it's the first time I've heard her be a little bit frustrated. So she had her first ever entry there was a DNF. We talked about that, but then she's otherwise unbeaten at Hardrock, which is impressive. And that includes having done the triple. We'll talk about this in a second. But so Tara Dower came second. This was 2 weeks post Western States and set the fastest combined time for the Western States Hardrock double when they're less than 2 weeks apart. And we talked, the triple from Courtney was Western States, then into Hardrock, and then into UTMB, where she won all three of them in 2023, which is ridiculous. 300 miles in that time. And let's not forget, she came second to Rachel Entrick, previous guest, at Cocodona this year. So she's, to win and win so dominantly was impressive. And then Ludo Pomeray, the 51-year-old, I think he's turning 51. He did this just a week before, so he's now 51. He set the course record as well in 21 hours, 11 minutes, which is his own course record.
Wow.
And he bested that by 20. Yeah, and he bested that by 22 minutes. So one thing with Ludo is he's only in the last 2 to 3 years become a professional full-time. He was working full-time before this. So there's this concept, yes, he's 51, but he's also like, what's his training age and what's his racing age? And so, yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, he's a crowd favorite. He's been, I think last year he was 6th, the previous year he was 5th, and the previous year he was 4th at UTMB. So this guy can race. He's great, Ludo. He's one of the fan favorites. I love him.
Let's move on to track and field and the London Diamond League. I managed to catch half of the broadcast. I did not catch all of it, but what went down there?
So this is my second suggestion for features for different companies. Social media, and this is, let's just say Meta, because they control all social media, including WhatsApp, should have a feature where you can block certain things. Like, I don't want to know about the Josh Kerr's mile record because I'm trying to watch it tomorrow and you just can't avoid it. It's crazy. And so I sort of had this ruined for me, but that's a feature that, Meta, who are listening, I'm sure they run Zencaster, our podcast platform as well, or Spotify, or all of the above. Do that, build that in as well. But anyway, so watch this whole meet. Great meet. I want to go to London. It was sold out, 60,000 people. It's amazing. Sunday afternoon, just great. So anyway, I think I noticed high-level themes. Some athletes are back, which is the right time of year to be back, although there's not a lot of championships. We do have the Ultimate Championships, which is quite a cool thing we'll talk about in a few weeks. It's a great setup, I think. It's going to be great. But anyway, in the 400-meter hurdles, Carsten Warholm is back. He set the meeting record and world lead this year. He's been off the pace quite a bit in racing, and maybe it's just Dos Santos racing him better. And maybe if Dos Santos was there, he wouldn't have raced so well, but he did do that. So maybe he's turning a corner. We talked about Jess Hull's struggles recently. She won the 3,000 looking really good. And that's coming into the Com Games, which is starting, I think, in a couple of days, Commonwealth Games. So, maybe she's rounding. Yeah, the Commonwealth Games are starting soon, man. It's not long at all.
Really? What? How? When? Is anyone watching it? Anyone talking about that? We can talk about it. I think it might be past its sell-by date.
Well, I mean, they had to move it from Australia. They moved it to Glasgow. It's reduced in size, reduced in events and stuff. So, but yes, Jess Hull, I think, is racing there. Not in the 3,000. I think she might be racing the 1,500. But yeah, I think maybe she's been in a heavy block of training. Maybe she's rounded a corner or whatever. Who knows? The women's 800. This was meant to be Keely trying to break the world record. I don't think she ended up doing that. They was slow through the first 400 meters. They ran 156, and the target for the world record should have been 153. Sorry. Anyway, 53 and 56 for the 800. Anyway, point being, Femke looked like Keely won this. Femke came in second pretty well, but Femke just doesn't look like she's going that hard. The question is does she just hide the fatigue well, right? Is she masking fatigue well? Or is she so aerobically developed that she's not really pushing that hard? It's hard to understand this because she keeps getting better, right? She again ran 156. Sorry, I got this wrong. They were slow through 400. They ran 156. They should have been targeting 153 for the world record. Anyway, point being, Femke runs a 156. Looks like she's doing it pretty easy. The question is, can she run 155, 154, 153, really start challenging this? Is she just foxing, or what's the story? I doubt she is. So the question is, why can't she, why isn't she running faster, or why does she look so good, so relaxed with it? So anyway.
This is a new discipline for her, right?
Yeah, so she stepped up from the 400-meter hurdles, which obviously hurts a lot more. And when she finished those, she looked like she was cooked. But maybe it doesn't hurt more. It hurts differently. So, yeah. So watch this coming into European Championships, which is just after the Commonwealth Games, where, of course, Femke gets to race Keeley there as well in a championship race. So let's see how that goes. In the women's discus, we've talked a lot before about Valerie Sion on this podcast, formerly Valerie Adams, Valerie Allman. Valerie Adams is an ex-New Zealand shot putter. But so Valerie Allman's like just dominant in the discus. She's almost unheard of that she gets beaten. She's got 2 Olympic golds. She's got a World Championships gold and silver. She's got 5 Diamond League finals championships. She very rarely gets beaten in a Diamond League.
Valerie Sion.
Yes, Valerie Sion, that is. What was I calling it?
Adams Valerie Allman again.
Anyway. Anyway, point is, on the last throw of the day, and we talked about this, remember, in the Diamond League, in the throws and the jumps, the horizontal jumps, you get 3 attempts and the top 3 get to go again, but then you go first, second, third, right? And so on the very last throw of the day, Sierra Jackson, the NCAA champion, threw 71.72, almost a 4-meter PB. 4 meters, which is huge. That's like so many feet. It's like 12 feet. Anyway, and she it's a Diamond League record and won this. So I was really impressive from the young thrower there. And then we got to the men's mile, like the blue ribbon event, the thing that everyone was there, Kerr's 222 project. He's looking to break my favorite runner of all time, Hisham El Garouge's 27-year-old record. Shout out to previous guest, Mario Frioli. He had a big segment on this in his newsletter. We'll throw a link to that Hisham El Garouge race on YouTube in the show notes. It is a great race. Go watch that, that Mario shared. But anyway, a quick corrections corner from last week. I said Cam Myers is going to be, also 2 weeks ago, I said Cam Myers is going to do this race, and he was planning to do it in the early phases of his season, but he came out on Strava and actually said he's focusing on the Commonwealth Games, so he didn't race. The other thing I noticed here was that there was a staggered start. You almost never see this in the mile or 1,500 meters. It is allowed to happen, but it's very rare that you see it happen because there were so many people in the race, but you did see it. And then, I mean, the race was pretty much as you'd expect. Josh Kerr pretty much just ran even the whole way. It's said to have been a negative split. I think people who call it a negative split don't understand that it's 1,609 meters, right? It's not 1,600 meters. So if you look at his 800 time and his finish time, it looks like he negatively split it, but like halfway isn't really that. Anyway, the point is a mile is 1,609 meters, not 1,600 meters. So you pretty much evenly split it, which is how you would probably run this, is you know that you can sustain that and you go and do it, right? So he ran 3:27 through 1,500 meters. And then ultimately ran 3:42. The previous record was 3:43. We'll get to some of the implications of that. But some other observations I had. Steve Cram was on the call. He is at least for the British coverage, he's a former mile world record holder. So he was just great on this call. It was really nice to hear that and nice to hear how excited he was. And then they interviewed Josh Kerr's coach, and my apologies, I can't remember his name, is Danny something, I think. But anyway, McKay, maybe? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But he said it was really interesting. He talked about prepping for this. They've been prepping for this since like ages and ages. And he said it's different. Usually they develop for championships, and Josh Kerr always talks about the value of championships and championship racing. Now, the problem with a championship is you have to be able to win it multiple ways. Yes, you have to be able to run fast, but you also have to have a kick, right? And Josh Kerr famously had this great kick. And that, to maintain that, is different to trying to run as fast as possible, optimize to run this pace and lock in to this exact pace to run it, right? So Josh Kerr was pretty confident he would do this, and there was a great lot of marketing around this from Brooks and Amazfit and all sorts of other people, right? Which was cool to see. But he said that you didn't have to develop all these other attributes. You just had to lock in for this and be very myopic in the development, which I thought was really interesting. And so when he ran his 1,200 meters at altitude in Albuquerque that they all publicized pre this race, I said, it doesn't like, I'm not sure that he can do this, because whilst that's impressive, he's got this dominance of this kick. That's how he's been winning. So maybe he isn't aerobically developed enough. But when you think about it, like if you allow that strength to not be a strength anymore and develop something else, right? Because we're always trading off in physiology. Probably doesn't surprise me he ran this. I just hadn't thought about it like that and hadn't thought he'd be doing this, because I thought he might be worried about trying to win a Com Games or a European medal, but I don't think he is. I think he's like, I'm going to break this mile world record and the rest of it I don't care. Right. So that's quite interesting. But he's now seemingly focused on Hisham El Garouge's 1,500 meter world record after taking the mile record from him. So again, Kerr's 1,500 split was 3:27, and he could have broken the 1,500 meter world record. That would have stood, but he wasn't fast enough, obviously. The record is 3:26, which is roughly equivalent to a 3:41 mile, and he ran 3:42. So if you look at the World Athletics points, The 1500 world record is 1302 points. The old mile world record is 1292, and the new mile world record is 1298. So basically, what this is saying is the 1500 meter record is a little bit stronger than his mile world record is, even now.
Do you think it helped him having someone like Jared Nagus there pushing him on, making made the race faster, or he would have done this anyway, even as a time trial?
Well, he didn't really, like, Nagus wasn't really pushing him that much, to be honest.
Yeah, not for the last couple of 100 meters there, but
no, I thought Nagus or Cam Myers would be out there really sitting on the pacemaker and then being another rabbit for Kerr. That was my prediction. Didn't happen. Kerr just sat on the pacemaker, then did his own thing. He obviously knew he was dialed in for this. Like, if you see them talking about the spike development, they're like, yeah, we developed the spike to run this pace, for Josh to run this pace. It's not for anybody else. It is not to run another pace. So, like, everything's dialed in. And, I'm still battling with how we should feel about people who are the big name for a brand and therefore get everything made for them, specifically bespoke for them. Like, is that okay or not? Is that a step too far or not? I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. I don't want to be a negative guy. I don't want to be the old man waving his fist at the sky, because I think it's easy to do that. And the innovation is cool and the projects are cool. And I think, similar to Formula One, that trickles down some of that technology. But yeah. Anyway.
It's the world we live in. We live in.
Exactly right.
Should we talk about the Tour de France? And one of the biggest stories in sport to come out is the testing of riders, particularly Jonas Vingegaard at 2 a.m. one morning and Tadej Pogačar at 5 a.m. one morning. Now, this news has leaked to the media and it has become a bit of a media storm. Everyone's talking about this.
Yeah, I was texting with previous guest Hannah Walker last night about some of this, and I said, in American team sports, the off-season is pretty quiet, particularly if you don't have another sport on. So right at the moment, there's no NBA, no NFL, so it's pretty quiet. Guys obviously take a holiday, etc. But in this phase, like, anything becomes like newsworthy. And I think this happens in the Tour de France or Grand Tours in the first 4 hours of a stage and overnight. There's just like stuff that just gets talked about ridiculously because then it becomes a big story because they have to have something to talk about, right? Because it's otherwise pretty boring. But anyway, so listen, they both got tested. They both didn't sleep much. Jonas subsequently had a crash. Now, your take from what I remember talking to you about is like, well, his bike handling's not great sometimes. So like maybe that was the genesis of the crash. People are saying it's related.
No, I don't want to say that. I don't want to say his bike handling's not good. I'm saying people crash. And he himself said it. Crashing is just part of bike racing. But the fact that he crashed the day after a 2 a.m. wake-up call, people are putting one plus one together, but 1 plus 1 doesn't always equal 2,
Yeah, and to be fair, Tadej made that intimation as well. One thing I'd say, and people are calling this inhumane, and we'll talk about this in a second. But interestingly, if you think about, maybe he was a bit unfocused. Jonas was having a good day, and he said he was having a good day, and his team said he was having a good day, and they said that he was feeling great that day.
They were riding on the front. They were riding on the front for him to try something at the time of his crash.
And so I'm not convinced that the sleep impacted it. One night's bad sleep generally doesn't impact you that much. We see this all the time with people who have a bad night's sleep before their insert Ironman, marathon, etc. So if you're generally sleeping pretty well, you can sustain this. The other thing I'd say is being woken up at 2 sucks, but we've all had it done to us. I don't have children, but I'm sure if people with children have this and you go back to sleep and whatever else, yes, it's a bit more intrusive. You have someone come to your room and, you have to provide a sample, and maybe they even took blood. I don't know if they did, but if they took blood, there's a bit of pain and all that sort of stuff. And I'm sure, it's not like, oh, it's 2 a.m., suddenly I can pee. There's a reason you can't pee in the middle of the night. You have hormones that prevent you doing that. That's why you don't wet the bed and don't get up in the middle of the night to pee. So all those things can be true, but at the same time, this is part of your job, and we'll sort of come to this. But one of the arguments that I saw about this is that, it's before a hard stage and people need to recover. That's also when we need a test. That's also when people are most likely to cheat. So it's just a lot of the arguments that are against this are also the exact same reasons why we have to do this. Right? Recovery is super important today. We've got a big day tomorrow. Isn't that the perfect time to take something that's going to help you tomorrow? Isn't that how we would do this? If we were going to blood dope and give you red blood cells, wouldn't we do that the day before the big mountain? So yeah. I also found it to be quite interesting that the riders who were tested, for the most part, were pretty accepting of it. Tadej's if this is what we're going to do for team sport, so be it. Jonas's team manager and his DS were hey, we knew this was possible. This is part of being a professional cycling. Everybody else, Remco was saying, I wouldn't have gotten up and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. It's quite interesting to look at the people who had it done. Maybe it's them trying to put on a show and posturing, but yeah. The other thing I found interesting was Jonathan Vaughters, who, you know, for those who don't know, he's head of EF Cycling, one of the teams, but he's also like, you know, he's been pretty public about his own doping, and, you know, at the time of sort of Lance Armstrong, and he said, basically, it's pretty key to test at these times because you would find microdosing of things like EPO, HGH, etc. He also went as far as to say as they'd have been caught with those things in 2001 if they were tested in the middle of the night that way. And he said and that would have improved the image of the sport, and that this testing was necessary because of their behavior in the 2000s. And he apologized because of it, which I thought was quite big from him and interesting.
I also heard him say, well, he's been an advocate for anti-doping since then. The reason he started what is now become EF was he wanted to prove that you could build a clean team and win as a clean team years later, subsequently. But I also heard him say cycling is probably the cleanest sport in the world, and you are not going to find this level of scrutiny in any other sport. And this is because of the shadow of the past and what they did, which speaks to his apology there that you just mentioned.
Yeah. And then I also saw this post on Blue Sky from James Spragg, who's one of the coaches at Tudor Pro Cycling, which I thought was an interesting take. A prerequisite of any anti-doping program should be that it doesn't itself create an unfair environment for competition. 2AM controls mid-Tour de France cross that line, in my opinion.
So is he saying if you have a test at 2 a.m., it should be for everyone, for all the competitors, or for none?
Something like that. Where you're basically not trying to create this. And this sort of feeds the narrative that some people had is like, oh, the two key guys were tested, ruined their sleep on the big mountain stage when the French rider wasn't tested. And so the French rider could have a good day.
Right? I think that's a cynical take.
It's 2026, conspiracy theories abound about, you know, Messi and the referees and all sorts of stuff. So what I'm saying is like this exists, and I don't love it, but it exists.
I mean, from what I understand is this is a normal protocol, and they needed to get a judge's permission to go do that. And to get a judge's permission, they would have had to present circumstantial evidence. Is that the word? Now, I'm not saying they think the riders are positive, but they obviously think that they have enough of a reason to go and test, and a judge would have said, yep, this is enough of a reason, you can go do it in these abnormal hours.
Yes, but we're going to come to that in a second.
Okay.
But just some more context here. Remco Evenepoel, that we talked about, who said he wasn't going to answer the door if it was 2 a.m., and Paul Sextus, the young French rider, were tested at 10 p.m. the night before the team time trial yesterday. So we're recording this on Wednesday the 22nd.
The time trial. Yeah.
Individual time trial, sorry. The time trial was yesterday, the 21st on Tuesday, and they were tested both before that. Also, sources speaking on condition of anonymity confirmed to Cycling Weekly, which is a journalistic outlet, that at least 2 other teams have been tested at 5 a.m. during the tour, one in the first week and one in the second week. Yeah, so it's amazing what goes through. All the riders were also tested pre-tour in Barcelona and then tested on their rest day for the athlete biological passport. So there's obviously like a concerted effort here.
Yeah, I have a theory. I think that the UCI, the world governing body, are always under threat. There's always someone trying to unite the teams to have a bigger seat at the table, whether it is in earning a share of the TV revenues, etc., just so that they can have more power and more of a voice in the sport. Because at the moment, I would say the UCI and then ASO, the Tour de France, they're the biggest power players in the sport, and the teams have very little say and power. And periodically, there are people, mostly billionaires, who come into the sport and they try to regroup everyone and get everyone to get the teams together on the same side to have a seat at the table. And that is happening right now behind the scenes from what I can gather and the people I've talked to. And I think this is the UCI again trying to show we do what's good for the sport. We are here. We are running the sport. The sport is clean. This is what we're doing. I think there's a bit of that going on. Having said that, what is the anti-doping landscape like for cycling?
So there's a couple of things here, and we're going to come to some of that because what you bring up is a good point. So one thing to note here with cyclists is they effectively fund part of the anti-doping efforts via the CPA, which is their like professional cyclist association. So they give about 10 million euros from their pockets. And this is following the big hearings and issues in the sport, the 1998 Festina case and that sort of stuff. But the key document in all of this is 2015, the Cycling Independent Reform Commission delivered a report that was delivered to the UCI. You can find this, Google it. I found it yesterday. I read through it. It's interesting. Not all of it. It's huge. but it effectively looked at all of the issues at the UCI and said, like, this is why all the doping happened. It broke it up into different eras, the Armstrong era, whatever else. And basically one of the things it pointed out was the UCI wasn't following its own rules, is one of the things. And it also has allegations of corruption, etc. But the document had a number of recommendations. And recommendation number 6, again, this document was delivered over 10 years ago, in 2015. Recommendation number 6. The no testing window from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. helps riders who microdose to avoid being caught. The Circ is conscious of the principle of proportionality, but the absence of nighttime testing is a weakness in the current system and needs to be addressed. The UCI CADF should make more use of the exception contained in Article 5.2 of the 2015 UCI anti-doping rules, serious and specific suspicion that a rider may engage in doping, to test at nighttime. This is a recommendation that was given over 10 years ago. Now, that was at a stage when the UCI was doing the testing, as I understand it. Since 2021, they have contacted the ITA, which is the Independent Testing Authority. Remembering this, we need to have independent bodies doing this testing, because otherwise the UCI can test someone and go, we don't want to catch him, wipe that off.
That's happened in the past, yeah.
This is why they're saying the UCI wasn't following their own rules, right?
Yeah.
So the ITA is an independent testing authority, and they test multiple sports. We talked about the ITA. We talked about a little while ago, the TUE list, and that was only ITA-related sports. So they don't test every sport, but the ITA are an independent body. Now, part of this is also important because you don't want the cyclist to say, we're paying you 10 million, we want to change things. We'll get to that in a second as well, right? So according to the Times this year, it says, though the number of tests has been impressive, the number of positive tests has been minimal. Over the last 5 years, when the ITA has been testing, since the ITA took over testing, there have been almost 1,000 drug tests at the Tour. Right? This is just at the Tour de France, right? The law of averages might suggest some number of positives from this. There hasn't been one, right? And remember, they haven't been testing at night either, right? So the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result, right? You've had 5 years of testing, 200 tests during the Tour, none of them have been at night, and you've had no positives. Now, two realities here. You're not catching the cheats, or there are no cheats. Again, we talked about using a Bayesian approach here. History tells you there's probably somebody cheating, right? Now, you get to decide what that likelihood is, but history would suggest that it's probably that. Earlier this year, there was a story running The Athletic that claimed that an unnamed source close to the UCI was pressing the ITA to find a high-profile doping case within the sport. Implicit in this was the belief that a high-profile positive would show that the system was working. This is also potentially speaking to your situation, which is, hey, maybe we want to show, hey, you guys aren't doing the right thing. We are. Like, this is what you were alluding to before with respect to the UCI trying to take power.
Yeah,
from
they might
back
be.
From the teams.
They would certainly benefit if that is true. My theory, they would benefit from catching a high-profile rider to show that we are running the sports accordingly.
Yep. Interestingly, Tadej Pogacar has mentioned that he's been tested more this year and more outside of his hour allotment. So for those who don't understand, basically what happens is there are a number of ways you can get tested. You get tested in competition, so it's at the Tour de France, right? And that's mostly like a IQ test. You shouldn't be testing positive on the day. It's a bit different at the Tour de France because it's a long thing, but like at the World Championships of Athletics, like if you get tested positive on that day, like you're just silly. Shouldn't be doing that. You can also get tested out of competition. Now, these out of competitions happen in a couple of ways. One is to have a registered hour. So as an elite athlete, you have what they call the ADAMS system, ADAMS. It's basically it's a whereabouts system. You have to fill out 1 hour slot every day of the year where you'll be and an hour that you're available to get tested. So you can get tested. They can turn up during that hour. You have to be available. And if you miss that, that is a missed test. 3 missed tests counts as a positive, right? Basically.
3 missed tests in an 18-month window, I think, counts as a positive.
Yeah. There's also random tests. So they can just turn up to your training. They can turn up to anywhere else. If you miss those, that's not a problem. It's slightly different. But Tadej's saying he's been tested randomly a lot more at his apartment, etc. Right? So there's that.
I got to tell you, it has to be one of the worst jobs in the world, being the actual tester, the actual person to go do the test, because I have just returned from a professional cycling environment in Europe where the testers rocked up for the riders, but they rocked up 5 minutes after the rider had just weed and gone to the loo. So they had to, how it works is once you make contact with the rider, you cannot let them out of your sight until they give you a sample. So that rider couldn't weave for like another hour and a half. And that tester was at the breakfast table with us. He was following the rider around. It is so awkward. There's a stranger in this environment and you know it's a tester and you can't really make conversation with them or anything. It has to be one of the worst jobs in the world.
You can make conversation with them. You're allowed to talk to them. They're nice people usually. I've heard many people say like they had a great chat with the tester, had a cup of tea with them or whatever else. One thing to be careful of as well is if you drink too much water too quickly and you pee out a sample that's not concentrated enough, you have to go again. So it's like a balance to strike. But yeah. I've got, so one of our listeners, TGJ, that I run with a bit, he once had a tester turn up to training and he parked his car at training. The tester saw him and was like, "Oh, yo, are you Tom?" And he's like, "Yes. I'm going to an exam." And he's like, "Cool." And he went and sat and had to watch Tom do an exam at university.
Hopefully he learned something.
Yeah, well, it was an exam. So he didn't get to see Tom's paper. Tom sat at a 3-hour exam, so this tester just had to wait with him, which is wild. But I mean, the test is a rough job because yes, you have to wait. And I've seen that happen. That same story you mentioned, I saw an elite weightlifter have that happen to them as well. It just came out of the toilet, literally walked out of the toilet. The tester was like, "Yo, I'm here to test you." But you also have to watch them physically pass urine out of the urethra.
Yeah.
So like you have to go shirt up to like below your nipples and then pants down to your knees. Yep. So it is not a great job in that respect. But anyway, so interestingly, I've been reading into this, like what are the rules around testing? Because this and time of day, right? So we talked about that sort of 11 till 6 is kind of the sacred period that you're not meant to test in outside of certain circumstances. So until this year, the ITA had never conducted night tests at the Tour de France. Obviously, Vingegaard 2 a.m., Pogacar 5 a.m., that's at night, right? After the 14th stage. Other riders have been tested at night as well. The ITA has to get permission to test riders outside of the 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. window, right? So from 11 till the next morning is like a window that they need to be tested at, which can be approved by a French judge in this context. Obviously, it's not a French judge if they're in Italy, right? That makes sense. It's under a rarely used French legal procedure requiring a high statutory threshold, which means you have to have a high suspicion. So an anti-doping source said that it may have been the first application of these measures introduced into French law in 2015, right? So this was obviously as a result of the doping things. This is probably the first time it was used. L'Equipe, which is the newspaper, which, fun fact, Tour de France exists to sell newspapers for L'Equipe. That's how it started. So it reported that Article L232-14-4 of French sports law requires a judge to be satisfied that the statutory conditions for such an order are met, including, we're called, serious and consistent suspicions of an anti-doping rule violation and a risk that evidence could otherwise be lost. All right?
Interesting. I would love to know. We'll never know. I'd love to know what they submitted. I would love to know.
Correct. According to the French Sports Code, testing must take place under conditions that ensure strict proportionality between the infringement of the athlete's rights and the objectives of the fight against doping. This is very French, right? Those objectives include the protection of fair competition and athlete health. The law further states that the procedure must be limited to collecting samples and recording any observations made by the athlete. So it's quite interesting, very difficult situation. They must have had some reason to do this. And for people to think that the ITA and the UCI and whoever else didn't think there'd be a negative response to this is madness. They knew there was a negative response. So they had to have good enough suspicion or be willing to say, no, we're doing this and we don't care because it's a good PR move. But I don't think the latter is possible given the requirements to meet in French law. So they must have had some suspicion. Now, you could have a random whistleblower do this, right? Like some John random could call up and go, "Yo, I've got a tip for you. They're doping. You should, they're going to take a bag of blood at whatever 2 a.m. So go test them." Like that can happen. And you'd hope that people aren't doing that. You'd hope that if they did, that it'd be corroborated. But it's hard to know here because like there's a lot of, again, that 2015 document talks about the omerta, right? The silence of the peloton. So yeah, it's hard to know why they've had enough, I guess, suspicion to do this. But, in terms of why they would do it, the answer is microdosing. It's real simple. If you can take something between, say at 11:01, if you can take something and make sure and know that it'll be gone by 6 a.m., then you can take something every night.
Okay, so that's why they're doing it, because it lives in the system for such a short period of time.
Can do, yeah, if you take a small dose, right? And so people would say, and I've seen someone say, well, it would be such a small dose it wouldn't affect.
Yeah, how would you benefit from it?
Well, the answer is it would maintain some level of previously gained benefit, right? So you
Okay.
might go through a more systemic, more significant protocol, then you come to the Tour de France and you're just trying to keep something up, right? It's like a micro dose of whatever. Same reason well, not the same reason, but similar reason to why you wouldn't just have a day off on your days off, why you still do some riding, right?
Yeah.
It's like you want to maintain some capacity and that sort of stuff. So
Like, if the sport is one of the cleanest sports in the world, like Jonathan Vaught's the EF Pro Cycling manager suggests, like, I wonder how previous dopers who have cast this shadow of doubt on the sport for years and years and years, how they feel about it. Like, also those who are part of a murder, they didn't say anything, and they did almost irreparable damage to the sport, because this is a large reason why this is happening now. And the fact that we're talking about it even casts more of a doubt on the sport, when it could, in fact, be one of the cleanest sports in the world.
yes, and it's also going faster than it ever has. And some of that is nutrition and some of that's technology and all those things. But and again, my view on this is innocent until proven guilty. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. Having met some of these cyclists, I would find it very hard to believe they are doping. But that's classic when you know somebody you never think they could do anything wrong, right? So I don't want to be that naive. But the point I'm making is that people are suspicious of this because of cycling's history. Again, it's Bayesian, right? Like there is a reason probability wise previously, and then they're going faster. So it's one of those things. It's hard. Like we talked about this on the podcast. Like you just kind of have to suspend disbelief or believe everyone's dirty. Like it's a really hard thing to do. But what I found interesting in all this as well is the CPA, which is the Cycling Association, the president, Adam Hansen, has called for a rethink of things. And I think he's misunderstanding the issue, and either a very smart political operator, which is probably the most likely scenario, or not particularly smart as a human, because
He's a former bike rider who's slotted into this role.
So maybe he's a very smart operator then politically, right? But he made the statement, and this just showed me this is ridiculous. We want dopers to get caught, but we don't want to harass clean riders. Like that is literally the tension of anti-doping. Like that is the key tension of anti-doping.
Yeah, how do you know the ride is clean? You know they're clean by testing them.
Exactly. And like you're balancing the rights of the clean people to catch the dirty people. That's literally what you're trying to do, is you're trying to balance the rights of the imposition on human rights or whatever else, imposition on life. That is the cost of clean sport and the cost of part of why you're paid as a professional. Because quite frankly, you're not paid to ride the bike. You're paid for everything else. You're paid to do media, you're paid to do sponsorship stuff, and you're paid to get doping tested. You're not paid to ride the bike. These guys will be riding anyway. They love it, right? For the most part. So he also said, and this is part of why we can't have athletes paying for the anti-doping, right? This is part of why you have to separate that. We talked about this with Sebastian Sarway and Adidas and all those things. So he warned that riders may eventually have to consider whether they should continue financing the system that, in their view, places increasing emphasis on the number of tests and the collection of the performance data without delivering corresponding improvement in detection. We can't just say, hey, you're not doing your job, we're going to withdraw the money. That's ridiculous, firstly. It's also a conflict of interest. This is also like the best way to catch folks is regular testing, looking for trends, athlete biological passport, as we talked about, as well as performance data. That's where we're going to see irregularities and then start looking more in depth and start testing more specifically. He's talked about quality over quantity. He mentions this in some of his statements. The way that we have quality is we know who to test. Again, we want to catch the dirty people. How do we do that? Well, look for irregularities. He's just misunderstanding everything here. Part of the other thing he misunderstands is why do we care that these riders are clean? Right? Yes, there's a health and safety aspect, but the biggest thing is the image of the sport, right? Why do we care about the image of the sport? Because that's why people want to be involved. That's why companies sponsor these teams. And cycling has a model that is 95% sponsorship. So for him to say, oh, we're going to stop funding this, means that the image of the sport would be tarnished. Therefore, there'd be less money in it. Therefore, there'd be less money to pay this. Like, this is part of the reason you pay is actually that's an investment in clean sport and the perception of your sport. Therefore, you can get more money into your sport.
Referring to Jonathan Vaught's again, a few years ago, wanting to prove that they have a clean team, they voluntarily paid for extra testing in their team out of their budget, independent testing of their riders, speaking to this point.
Yeah. And again, the part of the problem with that is if you can decide when it is, then it's an irrelevant test. If you can just give money and say, you come test us whenever you want, that's different again, right? You just give money to the ITA and say, here's 50 tests worth of stuff. Test us as you see fit, then that's different.
Yeah. Right. Should we move on to our last story of the day? That was very, very big. Let's move on to the International Olympic Committee. The IOC has previously lifted the ban on Russian and Belarusian athletes competing as of July the 7th. It's been in place since October 2023 as a result of the Ukraine war. How do we feel about this?
Well, it's interesting. So this has happened because the Russian anti-doping organization, also the Russian Olympic Committee, has removed regional sports bodies from occupied Ukrainian territories from its membership, and that's the reason that the sanction was originally done, right? So it seems to be reasonable. Hey, we sanctioned you because you did this. Now you've stopped doing that. Okay, we're out. So I kind of get it, but we'll get onto some more technicalities here. The IOC will continue, though, to not hold events in Russia or invite Russian government officials to its events, right? So there's kind of like half sanctions, let's call it. The IOC is yet to decide if the Russian flag and anthem will be used at the LA 2028 Olympic Games, right? So part of the reason the IOC lifted this is to allow athletes a fair opportunity to qualify, because part of the problem you have is you have to qualify for the Olympics and you have to have a certain amount of time available for that, especially in more obscure sports. A little bit easier in some of the bigger sports, swimming, track and field, etc., because there's championships leading into it. But all Russian athletes returning to international competition must meet relevant anti-doping requirements, right? So now, again, you have a qualification period that they're sensitive of and a period before that where you need to meet anti-doping requirements. So you must be part of the national or a national anti-doping program, so that's RUSADA or the ROC, that is delegated to the ITA. Again, they don't trust the Russian authorities for previous behaviors, I guess, in the the Sochi Olympics. So they're saying the ITA has to do this, right? All athletes that are newly returning to international competition must have been tested multiple times prior to their return, based on the sports risk assessment, right? So riskier sports, more testing. Considering the timeline of qualification for the events, LA 28 Olympic Games, and to ensure a fair opportunity to participation for the international federations, they are responsible for establishing a time frame during which such testing must have occurred prior to any athlete newly returning to the sport, for those who have not already been included in a registered testing pool. So what this is saying is, because of when your qualification sports are, because of the risk of different sports, you get to decide how long they have to have been in the testing pool for and how many tests they need to have had as an international federation. The international federations, as part of their anti-doping program, must agree on the overall testing program with the ITA, including adequate number of tests needed in the time frame for testing. Should RUSADA, so Russian anti-doping, still be considered non-compliant by WADA in 2028 prior to the LA 28 Olympics, the IOC will instruct the ITA to ensure that all qualified Russian athletes have been subject to independent testing following the same approach, right? So at the moment, it has to be done by the ITA. They are hoping that RUSADA starts to do their own tests. But as a response to this, 9 European Union member states, so Estonia, Denmark, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Netherlands, Poland, Romania, and Sweden, have called on Brussels to stop funding sports bodies that have readmitted Russian and Belarusian athletes, which includes the IOC, World Aquatics, and the International Fencing Federation. So what happened when the IOC did this was they said, we're doing this, but also individual sports can decide how they manage this. Right? So it's kind of a half move, half spineless move. And so World Athletics has decided, we're not allowing the Russians and Belarusians back in. So they're still banned there. But the Russian Athletics Federation is appealing to the Court of Arbitration in Sport, CAS, about this decision. So it's just like a really interesting geopolitical mess here around the goal of the Olympics and what it stands for and whether, to include Russia and not include Russia. It's messy, man.
So hard because the athletes are what suffers for something that's totally out of their control. It's so hard, but let's see how it unfolds. Let's get to the doctor's office. Who is in the doctor's office this week? The first one being Georgia Hunter-Bell.
Yeah, so she withdrew from the London Diamond League. She just had an acute illness. Hopefully she's come. I assume she'll come good. She's probably just I'm just going to win a Europeans or a Com Games medal here, so I'm just going to take London off. So, and ultimately, I don't think that. I think she might have been there to sort of help Keely maybe, or something like that, but Keely wasn't really up to it either, so I think it was probably an easy decision for her, even though she said it was hard. We also had Mondo Duplantis, who was injured during the event for people watching, so he hurt his thigh. So let's see what happens there if he recovers again. He's looking towards European Championships, no doubt, so he had to pull out there. And then we had our two from the Tour de France, Jonas Vingegaard that we already talked about. He crashed out and broke his collarbone, and then Florian Lipowitz, who fell yesterday in the time trial. So I'm going to guess he's probably done a collarbone. I know Vingegaard did a collarbone.
I checked this morning. It looked like collarbone. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pretty common. So common things are common, as they say.
And then before we go, we have a scene on social this week. I'm always excited when we do have one. Something that we see on social that maybe needs to be checked a little bit. This one is IShowSpeed, the live streamer, big streamer in the world, says he wants to run the LA Olympics. David, save me. Please save me.
Yeah, I would say the chances of this round up to zero. Part of the reason, so this kid's quick enough. Yeah. Maybe he's not quick enough to run in the Olympics, but he's quick. He's not.
I've seen him race pro athletes before for fun, and he's actually, as amateurs go, he's quick.
Yeah, so he's not, he's not as slow as I am, but he's also not as fast as Noah Lyles. So there are levels to the game is the first thing. He's not competing regularly. He never races people over 100 meters. So, there's no 60 at the Olympics is the other thing. But also, he's an American. And that sounds ridiculous, but the American sprint team is the hardest team to make. It's the American sprint team is harder to make than the Kenyan distance teams because they only have one shot. You have to win nationals or come second or third in nationals. So the point I'm making is you don't have many spots here. Yeah. You've got there's a relay as well. So there's 6 spots, let's call it, or maybe 7 spots with an intermediary. He doesn't have a lot of opportunities here in one of the most competitive teams to make. So maybe if he was a Bahrainian athlete, I'd be oh, maybe this kid's a chance, but he just doesn't have a chance here. So this is all for the clicks. It's all for the stream. Don't forget, it's this pro wrestling. It's social media. This is all just hype. It is not real. He's not going to do this.
Right, let's get out of here. I have a lot of sports coming up for this weekend. I'm actually not sure what I'm watching. I'll be watching the Tour de France for sure. Do you know if the Springboks are playing this weekend?
No, the Nations Championship is done. Oh, actually, they might be playing the All Blacks. It might be the Greatest Rivalry Tour. That might be happening, where they got the four match. I don't think that's happening this weekend. I think that starts soon. I know that the All Blacks come to South Africa and then play 3 of the provincial sides to get softened up so that they're really beaten up when they play the Springboks.
They don't have a choice. Okay.
That's how this happens, mate. This is an old tactic for touring teams. You play the provincial sides, they intentionally tell the provincial sides beat them up, and they seed a couple of players in there to do it. So it is an old, well-known rugby tactic. So,
what are you watching this weekend?
I'm not sure. Whatever sport is on, I'll keep an eye on it. So I don't know too much of what's going on, actually, to be honest. I haven't done any pre-reading. I'm sure there's a Diamond League, or maybe not. Or if Com Games is on, I'll watch that. But not a lot else.
Okay, let's get out of here. Thank you so much to Precision Fuel and Hydration, to Stride Running Power Meters, and to Nomeo. Check them out. We appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, we'll ask you to do so now. We really, really appreciate your love and support. We publish a new episode every single Friday. David, thanks so much for putting this together. I'll catch you next week.
Thanks, mate. Talk soon.
Okay, ciao.